Do you know the difference between prompts, skills, and loops? In this video, I'm going to walk you through those differences and give you real examples that you can start to use in your own workflows. Let's jump in. All right, and so many of you know what a prompt is. Let's make sure our thing. Many of you know what a prompt is, and a prompt is just what you tell the agent to do, right? And what's important here is that this is for the human, right? And you'll see the difference as we work through this human agent and orchestrator. But this is typically where you give like a single instruction, easy command, like something like summarize this article in 5 bullet points. Many of us have done this. Help me write an email. Tell me about XYZ thing. This is often people using it as a Google search, which is perfectly fine, right? This is one off, one specific thing, one time request, and one immediate output. We'll look at an example here. Extract the vendor invoice number, due date, and total from this invoice and return the result in JSON. And JSON is just a file type for machine readable content. This is something that you're going to want to know. And so this is one invoice, one request, and one output type. Most of us are familiar with this type of basic prompt, right? We use this all the time. Most of the time when you engage with a ChatGPT or Claude, this is the way that you're engaging with it. And there's no problem with that. But we want to get to a point where we can get to skills. And skills is really the next layer of learning how to control and how to get the best kind of results and output from a generative AI system. And so these are made for agents, the actual agent, the actual AI system. And so when you're talking with Claude or when you're talking with ChatGPT, the underlying system, the underlying technology is an agent that's going in and processing your request. These skills, the SKILL.md, which is a file type, it's a markdown file. This teaches the AI how to perform the repeatable capability that you want to do. And so this can be a file with 50 lines or 300 lines, which means it can be a very long file or it can be a very short file. But the thought is that it's for an agent. And so I'm going to jump into Claude so you can just see what this looks like. And so if you go into your Claude and you go into customize, and then when you bring up customize, you'll see the skills that you have access to, skills that you've maybe downloaded into your system or skills that you already have. Now, all of us have a skill creator, and this is how Claude generates new skills if you ask it to build a skill for you. And as you can see here, it's a relatively long file, right? And that's the end of it. And so as I mentioned here in the video is that these can be up to 300 lines. And so it can be a very massive file with a lot of instructions for you. And so typically inside of your skill, you're going to go through the purpose of the skill. What is it going to do? What are the inputs needed to be able to have the skill work correctly? What are the instructions that the AI system should follow? And then what are the output formats, right? And so typically when you're creating a skill, I'll give you an easy framework to follow, right? You can use craft. And this is going to be an easy way to think of how you can craft the best type of skill, right? And so C is for context. And this is being able to provide the AI system with all the information that it needs, all the backstory information, all the files, all the folders, anything that's going to help inform the AI system of what's going on. The next R is for role. And this is being able to give the AI system a particular persona, because asking it to act like a neuroscientist and asking it to act like a second grade teacher yield drastically different outputs. And so designating a role for the AI system is helpful in being able to guide it in terms of what it should output. The next one is the action that you want it to take. And that's typically just a simple prompt. Summarize this article in 5 bullet points. And then the format, as we mentioned in this JSON, just JSON format type, this is the format that you want it in. What is the format? And that's going to be typically inside a file type, or if you want it in a paragraph form, if you want it understandable for a first grader, right? What is your format? And then the tone. And so your tone dictates, how should it do? And this is where you can kind of say, I want it to be wordy, or I want it to be short form. But in general, this craft format is what's going to help you build your skill. And so ultimately you get into something like this, right? What prompt said, extract the vendor invoice number, due date, and total for the invoice, return and result in JSON. The skill says, read the invoices consistently. The input type will be a PDF, an image, or an email attachment. The instructions are to extract the fields and validate the totals, and the output is going to be in JSON. And so you can see that's very different than this simple prompt, right? The skill is something that becomes a repeatable, reusable asset for your agent to be able to use. And so lastly, right, now that we really understand prompts, we understand skills, then you can start to think about loops, right? You can look at looping. And this loop is what tells the agent the when, the how often, and in what order it should execute the skill, right? And so the loop points to the skills or several different type of skills across several different agents, right? And that's a little more complex, but that's where you understand that this is a workflow, and now it's going to be an orchestrator, right? And so prompts are for humans, skills are for agents, and loops are for the entire system. And so let's look and see what this looks like. A loop has a trigger. And so this is really what something has to happen in order for the loop to be engaged. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And then it's going to load the context. We talked earlier about context as it relates to craft. And these are all the different files or information that is going to be needed to be able to process this. And then you're going to run the skill. And so the skill, again, would be the reusable playbook for the agent. And then it's going to check the output, right? And so this is a quality assurance metric that's in there to make sure that what is happening is proper. And so are we really pulling out and extracting and validating the totals from the invoice when we pull it out? And then the last one is just going to repeat. And so that's the loop if it repeats or if it hands off to someone else or some other agent. And so what does that look like in practice, right? What does this workflow look like? And so you say a new invoice arrives. That is your trigger. The invoice arrives inside of a file. It arrives inside of your email. It arrives somewhere. And so it loads the invoice file, which could be a PDF, right? We talked about it could be a PDF, it could be an image, or it could be an email attachment. And then we run the invoice reader skill that we made, right? This skill right here is the invoice reader skill that gets ran. And it validates the fields because that's a part of the process. And then it saves, sends, or reviews. Now, if this is something where you might have a human in the loop, is what they call this. And so this is where a human in the loop, or if you've done this enough and you've been able to validate that the AI can get this right, I don't know, 99% of the time, then you may say, okay, we'll go ahead and roll with it. And then we'll repeat for the next invoice. And so let's say you had 5 invoices arrive or 5 invoices that you needed to process. This is the process that the AI system will be able to go through. And so now you have a really good understanding of how to think about prompts, skills, loops. And so let me know if you have any questions in the comments. If you're interested in learning more, we have a new AI cohort that's coming up. It's going to be with RUDI. And RUDI stands for Responsible Use of Digital Intelligence. And that's an organization that I founded, Responsible Use of Digital Intelligence. Excuse my handwriting. But in these, we do proper AI training, AI adoption. We help small teams or individuals or even big teams in some cases. We arm you all with the tools to be able to think about AI adoption. And how do we approach this? That I've worked with several companies now, and I know that wrapping your arms around how to do this AI training and finding good resources, applied AI, is very difficult. And so we do that. And so if you're interested, let's connect on LinkedIn, jump on the RUDI newsletter to be able to learn about the next AI training cohort, in which we'll be focusing on applied artificial intelligence. I'll see you in the next video.